Well, welcome back, and welcome to new arrivals. My name is Monica Larios. I'm chairing the session. I'd like to welcome our next presenter, M.James from Arizona State. And Mark has 20 minutes. Take it away.
Sure, thank you. I was just saying, I've come a distance from Arizona State, but I used to study here. So it's nice to be back home. I studied at U of T for a few years. Thank you very much. I'm going to stick fairly closely to a set of notes that I have so that I stay right on 20 minutes and we have some time for questions. And I think it's okay if I stand here, right? Okay. Thank you very much for coming. I'm M.James, and I'm an associate professor of applied linguistics at Arizona State University. Today I'll talk for 20 minutes about one of the recent studies that I've carried out, and we'll have some time then for questions. I don't have a handout, but after my presentation I will post these slides and a recording. I'm making a recording and I'll put that on this website. So it'll be available if you'd like to check that out. So basically this study examines whether teaching can help promote second language students' self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is a widely studied psychological construct that refers to a person's beliefs about her or his own abilities. So when we're talking about self-efficacy of second language students, we are talking about these students' beliefs about their own ability to use the second language. Self-efficacy is a topic worth taking a close look at in second language education because of its impact. A second language student who believes that she is capable of using the second language is likely to gravitate towards opportunities to use the second language, to work hard when using the second language, to continue using the second language when situations become difficult, and to feel positive about using the second language. And this can all have a positive impact in measurable ways, like improved performance on tests and higher grades. So promoting students' self-efficacy is a reasonable goal for second language teachers. And a teaching tool that looks like it might be particularly well suited for this is tasks. Tasks are language teaching activities that require students to use the language meaningfully to achieve a communicative goal. For example, a task might involve having one student describe a route on a map so that a second student can listen and try to draw that route on a blank map. The communicative goal, in this case, the route that the second student draws, is a concrete demonstration of the student's second language abilities. So tasks have potential to show to second language students in a relatively explicit way that they can communicate successfully when speaking the second language. And this is important because research suggests that the most effective way for self-efficacy to develop is through an individual's first-hand experiences of success. So if tasks provide students with opportunities to experience success communicating in their second language, tasks may have a positive impact on self-efficacy. But research has not yet examined the influence of tasks on students' self-efficacy, second language students' self-efficacy. The closest that I have found is research that examined the influence of study abroad programs and project-based second language teaching on students' self-efficacy. Those students are related to tasks because, like tasks, students in study abroad programs and project-based second language courses have opportunities to experience success communicating in their second language. But while that research, the earlier research, hints at a possibly positive impact on self-efficacy, research design limitations like a lack of comparison groups mean that there is still a research gap here that's worth exploring. In other words, we don't yet know if tasks really are well suited to promoting second language students' self-efficacy. So with that background in mind, I developed a study to answer the following research question. Can second language students' self-efficacy be increased through task-based speaking practice? To answer this, I carried out an experimental study in fall 2015 with students in EFL classes at a public high school in a city in South Korea. I chose this context because I reasoned that in EFL contexts like this, students may have relatively limited opportunities to experience success communicating when speaking their second language. It was also a context that I was familiar with and in which I had some contacts who could help me to set up practical aspects of the research. And on this slide is background information about the students who participated in this study. As for numbers, a total of 83 students completed all phases of data collection. Of these 83 students, 54% were female and 46% were male. Ages ranged from 15 to 18 years, with an average of just over 17, and most reported being in the first year or second year of their high school studies. The main tool for data collection was a questionnaire that I created for this study. This questionnaire had 13 items that dealt with self-efficacy to speak English communicatively. And you can see about half of the items on this slide. I didn't put the rest of them there because it would have been too small. The font was just too small. But these are just examples. I used a format that has been recommended for self-efficacy research. And this format involves having a statement that describes an ability, like, I can speak English with grammar that is correct enough for a listener to understand me. Some kind of ability. Followed by an 11-point rating scale, going from 0% to 100% in increments of 10. And for the content of the items, of the 13 items, I searched the South Korean English education curriculum for speaking-related abilities that students were meant to develop. Abilities that I found in the curriculum and then used as the basis for these questionnaire items included being able to speak with linguistic accuracy, for example, using structures from a grammar list and a vocabulary list. Being able to speak to perform particular functions, including giving factual information, telling a story, expressing attitudes and emotions, persuading, socializing, and asking for help. Being able to speak in particular generic situations, like giving a presentation and participating in a conversation. And being able to speak to communicate with particular people, like classmates and teachers in English classes, and with people from outside school, for example, visitors from other countries. After these 13 items were created, I had the questionnaire translated from English to Korean, and then back translated to English so that I could check the quality of the translations into Korean. And as a final step in checking the quality of this questionnaire, once data collection was finished, I examined the internal consistency of the questionnaire by calculating Cronbach's alpha for the 13 self-efficacy items. The result was 0.98, which is considered strong. So besides the questionnaire, I also had to design task-based speaking practice for these students to do. It wasn't possible for this to occur during their class time at school, or for me to meet students out of class in person, because I didn't go to South Korea to do this. I did it from the US. So I designed a series of tasks that students could complete on their own time, independently. That ended up being 12 online tasks, spread out over approximately 1 month, and each task would take about 10 minutes to complete. For the tasks to have potential to show students explicitly that they can communicate successfully in their second language, in English, I designed the tasks so that they involved information gaps. So for each task, students were provided with a collection of pictures, like a collection of different faces, and the students were asked to make a 1-minute recording of her or himself speaking to describe as many of those pictures as possible in a sequence that she or he chose. Not the sequence that I provided them, but they had to choose the sequence. And then they had to upload this recording. I could then listen to the recording and I could try to figure out what sequence the students had chosen to describe the pictures. And then I could email the students back with the sequence that I thought that they had described the pictures. This sequence that I guessed, and emailed back to the student, would show the student how successfully she or he had actually communicated. So that describes the research materials that I created, the self-efficacy questionnaire and the task-based speaking practice. As for the procedure, the questionnaire and activities were arranged as a course in an online learning management system in Blackboard. And when students enrolled in this course, they were immediately placed into one of three groups. Group 1 would do the task-based speaking practice. Group 2 would do speaking practice that was similar to the task-based speaking practice in scope and design. In other words, those students in Group 2 would do a sequence of 12 activities, about 10 minutes each, that involved describing a collection of pictures in a 1-minute recording, so all that was the same as Group 1. But, and this is important, instead of describing the pictures, the collection of pictures, in a sequence of their own choosing, and then receiving an email from me telling them what sequence I thought that they had described, and that's what Group 1 did. Group 2 would instead describe the pictures in the provided sequence. And then they would receive an email from me telling them what their speaking rate was in the recording. I just counted the number of words, the speaking rate. In this way, Group 2's speaking practice was not task-based. Right? It was not communicative. The feedback that these Group 2 students received, their speaking rate in the recording, for example, 100 words per minute, 120 words per minute, it might indicate how quickly they could speak, but it wouldn't help them to gauge how their own ability to actually communicate, right, to express meaning in the second language. And the third group, Group 3, would not do any speaking practice at all. The way that I organized students into these groups was random, based on the order in which they enrolled in the Blackboard course. And the last logistical thing to work out was the schedule of the research activities. For Group 1, this was the group that did task-based speaking practice, and Group 2, the group that did non-task-based speaking practice, the schedule was identical, involving the first administration of the self-efficacy questionnaire, and I'll call that the pre-questionnaire, then 12 speaking practice activities, one every other day over approximately 4 weeks, and then the second administration of the self-efficacy questionnaire, and I'll call that the post-questionnaire. And for Group 3, the group that did no speaking practice at all, the schedule was different. They completed the pre-questionnaire, then approximately 4 weeks later, the post-questionnaire, without any activities between those two administrations of the questionnaire. So after following that procedure, I had a set of data that I was able to analyze to try to answer the research question. So here's a general summary of the pre-questionnaire and post-questionnaire data. And you can see that this is divided into three groups. Number 1, the task-based speaking practice group. Number 2, the non-task-based speaking practice group. Number 3, no speaking practice group. And for each group, there's a column for the pre-questionnaire and the post-questionnaire. And there are 14 rows, 13 are for each of the items, each of the questionnaire items, and then there's an average score at the bottom. So looking just at the pre-questionnaire data, as the average scores in the bottom row of the table show, self-efficacy at the beginning of the study was moderate at 46.8 for Group 1, 52.9 for Group 2, and 54.3 for Group 3. And remember that these scores are on a scale of 1 to 100, asking students how confident they were in their abilities. So for these students collectively, at the start of the study, there was plenty of room for self-efficacy to increase. To look more closely at these data, I ran a few statistical tests. First, I looked to see if these differences between the three groups at the beginning of the study on the pre-questionnaire were statistically significant. I compared pre-questionnaire scores for the three groups using a Kruskal-Wallis test, and the results showed that the scores did not differ significantly between the three groups. In other words, as of the beginning of the study, self-efficacy was at similar levels across the three groups. I then looked to see if there were any significant changes in self-efficacy from the pre-questionnaire to the post-questionnaire. For each of the three groups, I examined the difference between pre-questionnaire and post-questionnaire scores using a Wilcoxon signed rank test. Results showed that for groups 1 and 2, there were significant increases from pre-questionnaire scores to post-questionnaire scores. And for group 3, there was no significant change. Finally, I looked to see if there were any significant differences between the groups in terms of the amount of change in self-efficacy. My main interest here was in figuring out how the increase for Group 1 the task-based speaking practice group, compared to the increase for group 2, the non-task-based speaking practice group. To do this, I examined the amount of change in self-efficacy using a Kruskal-Wallis test, and results showed that there was no significant difference between group 1 and group 2. In other words, the increase in self-efficacy was similar for these two groups. So, those were the results of the study, and as the first bullet here says, these results show that task-based speaking practice can help second language students to develop self-efficacy to speak English. More specifically, for students in group 1, which was the group that did task-based speaking practice, there was a significant increase in self-efficacy, while for students in group 3, which was the group that did only pre- and post-questionnaires and no speaking practice in between, there was no such increase. This is a useful addition to the large body of scholarly work on the use of tasks in second language education because it shows a new potential benefit of this teaching tool, the development of students' self-efficacy. Now, moving to the second bullet, the results also show that second language teaching does not have to be task-based in order to help students develop self-efficacy. More specifically, for students in group 2, which was the group that did non-task-based speaking practice, there was a significant increase in self-efficacy, similar to the increase for group 1 that had done the task-based speaking practice. This result is a useful addition to scholarly work on the development of second language students' self-efficacy because it has previously been suggested that self-efficacy develops through experiences of success with similar activities. From that angle, we might expect that for students to develop self-efficacy to communicate in the second language, rather than, for example, experiences of success on traditional grammar or vocabulary quizzes or other kinds of non-communicative second language activities, they would benefit from experiences of success actually communicating in the second language. But the results here suggest that our expectation would be incorrect if we thought that that's what they needed. It appears that students' self-efficacy to communicate in a second language can develop even without experiences of success actually communicating. I was surprised by this, but anyway, that's what the results showed. In this way, these results shed light on what similar means in discussions of activities that teachers might use to help second language students to develop self-efficacy. They don't have to be identical. It helps us to see a little bit more about what that similarity actually means. And finally, this study has limitations that point to directions for future research. First, the participants were English learners from one South Korean high school. So whether similar results would be found in other second language education contexts is uncertain. For example, with students with other first language backgrounds or who are learning languages other than English, and so on. Second, increases in self-efficacy were observed here only immediately after participants had finished the 4 weeks of speaking practice. So whether these increases were durable over time is not known. And third, while increases in self-efficacy were observed here with students who did task-based speaking practice and with students who did non-task-based speaking practice, it's unclear what specific aspects of that practice led to the increases. One possibility is that because both types of practice included some kind of performance feedback, for the students, and remember that for the students in group 1, the feedback was my email telling them what sequence I thought they had described this collection of pictures. For students in group 2, the feedback was my email telling them how many words per minute they had spoken in the recording. So because both groups received some kind of performance feedback, students in both groups had experiences of success using the second language. The way I looked at it, they weren't both communicative. They weren't getting feedback on how successful they were communicating, but they did get feedback about their performance and might help them to feel successful, right? So to examine this possibility, the possibility that it was that feedback, the different kinds of feedback, future research would need to include comparison groups that receive a wider range of types of performance feedback than what I did, as well as a comparison group that does activities without receiving any performance feedback. I didn't have that in my study. So these are important limitations of the current study, and they do point in clear directions. Right, thank you. they do point in clear directions for follow-up studies. So despite its limitations, this study does make some useful contributions to the body of scholarly work on the influence of second language teaching on students' self-efficacy. And it provides a useful foundation for future research on this important topic. I'll stop here and we have a few minutes for questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.